Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull Channel's Friday night stream. Got a good stream for you. We're gonna continue on looking at the Hospara bullshit of aristocracy, play some Geoguessr, maybe a little bit of chess, and with that, we'll just get started at that while we wait for people to show up. Sure, chat is working. Yeah, chat's cool. Okay, do some English action. When I don't always stream chess, but when I do, I play on Lead Chess because I don't give a fuck what my rating is on Lead Chess. Okay. Take. Get that other knight out there. And just continue development. It's gonna take that, I think. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Oh, holy shit. How the hell did I not notice that? Good, well, GG, very well played. Fucking hell. Okay, I have to do one more after that. That is a ridiculous little smothered mate there. Just make sure we've got... How's the sound looking? Yeah, okay, got sound output. Just a little preventive move to keep the knight from going off to try to make trouble on the G file. Okay. I've got a queen on a mostly open file. And I've still got the bishop pair, so I'm quite happy with that. I like to have the bishop pair if I can manage it. Okay, I mean the threat here is this. Okay, what happens if I go here? I mean, take this, but then I just take back the knight. Is there any trade he can force there? Yeah, I think that's good. And it also allows me to develop this knight to where I want to develop the knight to. Trading queens, but then there's just a free rook, and it's an absolute mess. This way, I'm just going where my king needs to go anyway in order to sort of do a scuffed castle. Here we can attack the queen. Can't take the rook because then the king just takes back. There, now all my rooks and queen are all connected, and the queen's attacked. Let's move this rook to some place where it's not being attacked by the queen. Just keep attacking that queen. Eventually we can... I mean, look, we have a mess of a position, but there's actually a bit of a lead on development because my rooks are comparatively active. It's definitely ahead on material for the moment, but there's this. If I can find a way to just distract this pawn away. And have an option for that. Regain a little bit of initiative. Just kind of use the pawns that I've got, get some kind of action going on the king side, and keep this queen occupied a bit, and hopefully I can make some good things happen. Let's just increase the support of this pawn structure that I'm building up here. We can... Pretty soon, we will be able to make an attack out of that. I don't think that was a good idea. Okay, do I want to en passant here? I can. If I do, what happens? I mean, is... It seems like it weakens White's king's side more than it weakens mine, to be honest. Although I could certainly be wrong about that. That... Not a bad idea there. If then I can just take back with this, so that's not a worry. In fact, then I can pin the bishop to the king. You just go like that. Then I've got some initiative, and maybe something can be made out of that. I have won in worse positions than that, I will say that. I'm not doing too badly on time here. I've definitely had worse time situations than this. Okay, the threat here is this. That's check. Then the it takes the pawn, and that's not very good. We want that not to happen. We're very much fans of... We're on team that not happening. So the question becomes, how do we make that not happen? Is there any way that we're preserving that pawn? Because that pawn's kind of important. Okay, what does the queen have after this? I got any way I can just defend that further. That square. Yes. Yes, I have. Oh, that sucks. Can't believe I just did that. Okay. I've still actually won worse positions than this, but it's becoming a much tighter competition than it was. Switch over to Geoguessr after this shit. This is fairly ignominious. Right, GG. And with that, we're going to move over to Geoguessr for a little bit. With one recent exception, I do not get my ass kicked that badly in Geoguessr. Okay. We are in a Portuguese-speaking country. That is Portuguese. I think this might be Portugal, actually. Yeah, this is Portugal. That sign says stop. We are not in South America. We are in the EU. Centro, Porto de Pesca, Senhora da Hora. Okay. None of those things give me any indication. I mean, it's a port city. That's true. Well, hold on. Porto de Lições. Refer. Yeah, definitely Portugal. It even says Infraestruturas de Portugal. I mean, let's see. Do we have a place called... I mean, lições can just mean lessons. But let's find out. Is there an area, a place called Lições on the Portuguese coast? Peniche, Nassari, Rio de Janeiro, Figueira da Foz. Gandra. And that's Spain already. Le Ayamonte, Tavira. Gil. Carvalhal. Welcome, Blonde 43. Pinal. Camarinha peixe frito. Snavi. Geoguessr. I am in a port city in Portugal. And then I'm trying to locate. The port is called Porto de l'Essence. And that name is not actually ringing any bells, so I'm just kind of looking around the map for it. Setúbal, it does not seem to be in. Sesimbra. So we're gonna have a little bit more of a look, see if we can get some more. Salários, pensões, saúde, habitação. PCP. O Partido Comunista do Portugal. Let me just make 100% this isn't just Lisbon, that they don't just have another name for the port. Because that does happen. Or have more than one port. Certainly have enough coastline for more than one port. Pareil. Seixalinho. Praia has to. What occurs to me, what? Forgot about them. Anjos, Santo Espírito. Via do Porto. Faja de Baixo. Candelária, Pilar. Yeah, Porto de l'Essence, and I have no idea where that is. I really don't know my Portuguese ports well. What we do know is it's definitely Portugal. What I don't know anyway is where there's a port called Porto de l'Essence. So we're gonna just have a little bit more of a look round. That's usually the best way. Já abrimos slots. Okay, it's a place with a there's a casino there. We know that. Don't know how widespread casino gambling is in Portugal, so I don't know if that distinguishes it from other major port cities. But we're gonna see. Let me see. What is this gonna tell me? Anything? Lavra, Maia, Aeroporto, Vila Real, Porto. Ah, okay. 28 to Porto. Okay. Okay, A29, A29. We're looking for A28. A28. There we go. Morim. Is that still... Hold on. Is that still A28? Or does that just convert like some of these do? A28. How far is it, does it say, from? Okay. Vila Real is nearby as well. And that's on A4. Vila Real. Okay. Okay, I think we have a good idea. This is north of Porto. It's always nice when they have these signs. Really simplifies things. 6.7 kilometers, 49.77. That's not bad at all. Okay, this looks like I immediately think Germany here, just from the pavement. Nope. No, Avenue Missionaris. We are in Belgium. French and Flemish. We are in a. Oh, it's not clear. Those are bilingual signs. Okay, that's a French. Vehicle maintenance, détection, réparation. Okay, so we have to find things that would usually be monolingual so we can figure out exactly. Ah, okay, we're in Brussels. Numéro 1, à Bruxelles et en Wallonie. We are in Brussels. Otherwise, why would they be telling me that this is number 1 in Brussels and Wallonia? So, Avenue des Missionnaires in Brussels. Alas, Brussels is a pretty bloody large place, so that might be a little bit complicated. See if we can get some more clues as to exactly where in Brussels we find ourselves. Match, etc. Okay, that's due Avenue des Missionnaires. Missionnaires Salon. Tehud, Alleyway. Okay, so let's see. Feels kind of city center. Rue de Quinte, Sainte-Catherine, Robert, Hulon, Miguel, Boulevard des Jubilés. Okay, let's see, Kugelberg, Ganshore, Rue du Pré, Avenue des Ébéniers, Quai de Heembeek, Siebeek, Rue des Palais, Rue Stevenson. Yeah, we need more information. More street names in particular. Dépannage et réparation. Maison de repos et de soins. Long-term care facility. Café du Coin. Let's see, get another street name out of this, and then we can. Cartouche et Tonnerre. Pubs. I mean, this seems fairly central. Consultation. on, give me something a little bit more definitive here. Basilique, okay, the Basilica, the Stadium, the Leopold II Tunnel. Gonplas, Galeorta. Yeah, okay, we'll just say someplace in central Brussels. .9 kilometers, 49.90, not bad. 3 out of 5. Okay, this feels North American. Okay, just a regular stop sign. That tells us not much. Neighborhood watch sign. That looks like a North American neighborhood watch sign. Could be Canada. Oh, A-cab! I consider that a shout out. Yes, A-cab indeed. Always nice when you see something like that playing Geoguessr. Nice graffiti there. Fifth and 18th. .510 area code. East Bay cities in California. Okay, so we are someplace Oaklandish. Fifth and 18th. Fifth Avenue, 18th Street. West Street, 18th, 17th, 19th. Okay, so that's the end of 18th. San Pablo, Jefferson, Martin Luther King. '17th, Market, Myrtle, Filbert, Linden, Chestnut, Poplar. Where are these numbered avenues, though? Does Berkeley have its own? .1 kilometers, 49.73. That's nice. And 4 out of 4, around 4 of 5. We're in some place that seems a little bit remote. Infrastructure's a little bit scuffed. So far, reasonably good resolution. I can't make that out. But it does suggest that this is right-hand traffic. Also suggests it's Europe. That sort of bus stop sign. Oh, hold on. That truck may have information that is useful on our quest. Cummins. That is not very specific. No, it's not a cop car, so that's also not going to be much help. For the limited purposes of Geoguessr, cop cars are very helpful. Balosa. Okay, this is a Russian-speaking place. Going over a river. Oh, hell. That might have been something. This is going to be... It's going to take forever, so we're just going to go be random. Holy shit. This is on the... Practically in Khabarovsk. 106 points. Okay, that sucked. Okay. Waterline Square. North America, definitely. This looks like a courthouse. City Hall or something. Either way, there'll be a big sign and it'll be helpful in our quest. John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Is that in New York? Passenger ship terminal. I mean, that would fit in with New York. They definitely have one of those. Very vertical. BMW of Manhattan. Yeah, we're in Manhattan. So 58th and 11th. Okay, we can do this. 58th and 11th in Manhattan. 42nd, 46th. 65th. 58th. 299 meters. There we go. That was not too bad, considering the disastrous Russia round. But Russia rounds are difficult, because most of the time they drop you in places that are in the middle of nowhere, and Russia has a lot of middle of nowhere. Okay, and now comes the part of the evening where we debunk reactionaries. Let's see, let's move that output up so that everybody can hear the bullshit. And we're going to just stick with this aristocracy. I like to see that through. Oh god, and there's quite a lot of that too. Well, okay.
Right.
How's that layout looking? Looking good. Now, one of the most telling things about this is that she started out by saying that she thought that fucking Vox was going to be really anti-Israel. And it's like, I mean, Vox is just erotica for fucking centrists.
Right. Because originally Arabs came from Saudi Arabia. Obviously, that's where the name comes from. There's a lot of debate.
No, that's actually, you can't really say that quite. That specific, yeah, you can't really make that kind of generalization, because the concept of who is an Arab is something that has actually changed over the years. In fact, the whole reason that pan-Arab nationalism, which she was talking about a minute ago and getting completely wrong, used language as the touchstone for who counts as an Arab, is that actually there is a large and fairly multi-ethnic Arab community. And there is quite a bit of reason to believe that actually the Palestinians certainly did not come from Saudi Arabia. At least quite a few of them did not. I mean, first of all, we know that they've been there for centuries. Second of all, we know that at least some of them were most likely there at the time in Roman times and simply converted to Christianity and later to Islam, or some just to Christianity, and some some remain Jewish as well. So, I mean, what she's trying to do here, and I wonder if she's going to go full Joan Peters and just deny that Palestinians are indigenous to the land. But what she seems to be trying to do here is set that sort of bullshit up.
Going on there, but I really think, like, once a group lives there for a few hundred years, I think it's fair to call them someone indigenous.
Now, keep in mind that she says this, in a few minutes she's about to say that maybe she shouldn't have said that, because I think she realized that she had taken the anti-Semitic line that European Jews, despite having lived in Europe for the whole, for like the past 2,000 years, longer than many people who are uncontroversially European, are not technically European. But here she's saying, if people have been there a couple of hundred years, then they're indigenous, and first of all, it's not really how that works, and second of all, then in that case, you can't really deny that European Jews are indigenous to Europe, because we spent a very, very long time there, way more than just a couple hundred years.
Declared war on Israel in an effort to establish a unified Arab Palestine where all of British Palestine had been.
Actually, now I think about it, I think I changed my mind.
The
Yeah,
new
here
state
you
of
go.
Israel won the war. But in the process, they pushed well past their
1967
borders under
borders
the
are
UN
impossible today
plan,
because of the settlements.
taking the western half of
Yeah.
Jerusalem and much of the land that was to have been part of Palestine. They also expelled huge numbers of Palestinians from their homes, creating a massive refugee population whose descendants today number about 7 million. At the end,
So some of this is true, some of this is not.
Oh, well, no, actually, that was all quite accurate. I mean, if anything, it was an understatement, because it sounds like the expulsions were just kind of part of the war, when, like it just kind of happened, when that's not the stated debate amongst historians. I mean, at this point, it's fairly uncontroversial that there was a plan. It was called Plan Dalet, and the whole idea was to expel as many Palestinians as possible and prevent them returning after the war, because they were trying to establish a Jewish colonial majority in their state.
Let me just repeat this just so
in
I
the
don't
western half of
make sure I don't
Jerusalem
misunderstand
and
that.
much of the land that was to have been part of Palestine. They also expelled huge numbers of Palestinians from their homes, creating a massive refugee population whose descendants today number about 7 million.
Okay, so this was the original allocation of land. Remember, the Arabs rejected it. Okay, and they started.
Which, I mean, she keeps on saying that like that's some sort of a gotcha, that Palestinians did not accept an allocation of their land that was made without consulting them in order to form a colonial regime on their land.
War. The war starts. Israel wins the war. They should not have won the war. Okay, in fact, most
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's actually a tragedy.
people would have.
In fact, quite a few liberal Zionists at the time were ambivalent about winning the war.
Against that. There's a lot of reasons why they ended up winning it. The primary reason is because of the arms help from Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union. Because the Soviet Union at the time was hoping for Israel to become communist. Because they were very lefty. So Israel...
No,
ends
they
up winning.
weren't,
It's
though.
kind of, it's a fast...
It's just that the Soviet Union, particularly at that point, also wasn't. They were just playing geopolitics, and they saw that the UN was doing a bilateral arms embargo, and they figured they could probably get the Zionist regime on side if they kind of circumvented that. And then they'd have a strategic springboard into an extremely strategic region and possibly sort of, with any luck, disrupt the otherwise seamless U.S. control of it. None of which fucking happened in the end. Because between the premier imperialist power in the world, then as now, and a second-tier power that doesn't actually have a real presence in the region, I mean, anyone who is looking to, who considers allying themselves with imperialist powers to be, like, the height of their strategic statecraft, is going to go with the more powerful ones, especially when the other side does not actually really have enough of a presence in the region to make it stable.
Fascinating. I love 1948. I mean, I shouldn't say it because in a way there were so many awful things that happened in the year. But I find it a fascinating war. First of all, it's a long war for such a small region. And on top of that, I know, surprise win for the USSR. But it's really ironic, of course, because the USSR ends up becoming an ally of Egypt against Israel later on, which is one of the reasons why Israel allies with the United States. You know,
Well, not exactly, again. I mean, there was very little likelihood that Israel was going to go from, that the Zionist movement would go from being part of, a subordinate to the British Empire, the preeminent empire of their day, to choosing a second-tier empire that would put them offside with the most powerful empire of their day. I mean, that just wasn't gonna fucking happen. Because it's a strategic non-starter. I mean, because the U.S. basically had, significant control over the region. The Soviet Union really didn't. You had non-aligned states, and you had Saudi Arabia, which was a regime imposed by the British Empire and then propped up by the U.S. Empire right up until now. the Soviet Union was not really in a position to provide them with anything except, to basically write a target on their backs. They were always going to go with the U.S. if the U.S. would have them, and the U.S. just needed to be convinced of it, and 1967 gave them the convincer.
Fun fact, right? They weren't original good allies. So Israel ends up winning that war, and that war was there were so many awful things that happened in that war, and there is still a result of that war is that there's tons of refugees. So there are lots of Jewish refugees, but because Israel wins the war, the Jewish refugees just move to other regions within Israel. Especially Israel wins so much territory. You can see how much territory they win. They win territory near Gaza over here. They win territory in the northeast. They win territory really close to Jerusalem, but not directly, right? And guess who else wins territory? And this is where Vox is being somewhat dishonest.
Okay, and this is where we left off, and here's where we get to find out if she's going to go full-on racist and start talking about how actually Jordan's the Palestinian state, the Palestinians should just move there.
Because Israel was not the only winner of the 1948 war. Because there was another country that was created originally by the British. Look what it's going on
lots
here.
of them.
It's Jordan. So Jordan ends up winning basically all of this territory. So this area is the West Bank. They win the West Bank. They win Jerusalem. And it's never Lebanon, yeah. Never try yet. Don't get, all these Middle Eastern countries are very different from one another. So Jordan actually wins a lot of this territory. And this is why, this Vox thing, and when you see a lot of these maps, when you see, those maps of, where they show you the shrinking region of Palestine?
Well, yes, the progressive land theft by the U.S. and Israel over the years. And now, okay, how's she going to deny this? Because those maps are accurate.
And then they show Israel. They're very dishonest maps because they always show what's the shrinking area as being Palestinian
which is what it was. That is precisely what it was. The people living there were Palestinians, and then they were kicked out, and that's why it shrinks.
A lot of the times it's Jordan taking over that region.
That's not the point. The point is not that. The point is that the people living there were Palestinians, and then they were expelled. And and what you're seeing each time it shrinks on that map is more Palestinians being expelled from their land. And that is continuing to this day. The Nakba has never ended.
And it's very strange that they lie about that, right?
Because they're not lying about that. That's not a lie. Yes, it was under Jordanian control, but the people living there were Palestinians.
And I don't understand why they get away with doing this on it, but people love those infographics, right? Because it makes
because they're accurate. I mean,
it seem all simple.
Palestinians from their homes, creating a
okay, so I mean, she says, "Oh, it makes it seem so simple," but okay, if it's so much more complicated than that, then I mean, why should we give a fuck that at some point Jordan controlled some of the fucking territory? Why does that matter? Why does that matter for the question of whether Palestinians, the indigenous population, have rights to live on their land? I mean, why does that matter for the question of whether a colonial regime that is explicitly racist and genocidal should be allowed to exist on indigenous land rather than something even minimally democratic?
massive refugee
But yeah, it's true. We actually don't know. It's a huge debate between historians right now on what the cause of these. So there were 700,000.
Oh no, there fucking isn't.
Refugees that were Palestinian Arab refugees that were created out of this.
Created. How do you create a refugee? What, you think that this happened in a fucking lab? Like mad scientists were just cloning them?
War. Historians to this day do not agree on what caused those refugees.
That is a lie. Okay, but let's see where she takes that. Because there's one really dishonest way, and then there's a really dishonest way, and we're gonna just see.
So, Vox saying that, implying that there's somehow 100% fact implies that there's a historical consensus. And I think that's a little...
Well, there is on the deliberate expulsion of the Palestinians. At most, there is some debate over whether it was opportunistic or whether it was planned from the start, and there's not all that much debate on there. Like, I mean, even right-wing historians like Benny Morris take the line that, yeah, the real problem wasn't that Israel, expelled hundreds of thousands of indigenous people, but they didn't finish the job. That's his line. He does not, this is a right-wing, hardline Zionist historian. He does not deny it because it's just undeniable.
Dishonest. It's not a little dishonest, it's very dishonest. There is no historical consensus, and I have my opinion, and my opinion actually agrees with Vox. I agree in terms of the research that I've done and the research that I've seen in terms of the amount of historical, scholarly work that's being done. I think it's much more likely, right, that I would say largely Palestinian refugees were kicked out by Israeli forces. However...
that's the historical consensus. It's been decades since that became the historical consensus. The debate moved on before she was probably born.
There is no historical consensus from that. It's considered a controversial opinion.
No, it really isn't. You have historians on the one hand who, they've looked at all the archives that are available. They've looked at the available evidence and however they feel about that event. There are people who celebrate that event. Hardcore racists like Benny Morris, for example, they all acknowledge it. Because you just can't actually seriously deny it and be taken seriously as a historian. The debate they moved on to was this something that was planned over the long term, or was this something opportunistic? They saw an opportunity that arose during the war and they decided to take it. And there's very significant evidence speaking in favor of it having been planned from the start as part of the war, not least the fact that they needed to create this Jewish majority that they kept on talking about, and the only way that was going to happen in any kind of short order, if they were going to be serious about founding the state on the principles they claimed to be, was if they did a mass expulsion. And another thing that really speaks for the fact that this was intentional and planned that way is that they immediately started declaring all the land that refugees had been kicked off of absentee land, and it was taken over by the state and allocated for Jewish use exclusively. There were efforts there were continuing efforts. This wasn't an enclosed event. It has continued the entire time. There is still ethnic cleansing going on in Palestine right now by Israel. You have really cynical shit like planting fucking trees over the villages that were destroyed just to make sure that the refugees couldn't come back. This is not... She's acting like this is controversial. It is not. You can go back to, scholarly histories from the 1990s, which, I don't know how old she is, but I get the feeling just that she's probably doesn't remember the 90s very well. And it was already uncontroversial that it was an expulsion, because there was never a really serious debate otherwise. The line that Zionists had previously taken, and I would not be at all surprised that she's taken this kind of line, acting like there's a debate, is that supposedly there were Arab radio transmissions, and they told people to leave, get out of the war zone, and that was the reason the refugees left. For which, leaving aside that would still mean they had the right of return, because refugees are allowed to leave, a war zone just for whatever reason they have. It doesn't matter who. But the thing is, the two historians, one of whom I can never remember his name, the other's name was Childers, they actually got access to the logs and recordings of the NATO listening station, or not NATO at the time, the British military listening station on Cyprus. Now, that covered all of the radio traffic in Palestine. Every single radio transmission that was broadcast during that conflict was recorded and logged. There was no, these rare radio transmissions that so much Zionist propaganda claimed existed, there was no trace of them. So obviously that was just a lie. There were these radio transmissions were something they made up. No evidence could be found. And at this point, we have enough documents to know that this was a planned expulsion. She's talking about this like these people would be like, oh yeah, like it's some sort of a controversy, but it isn't. Not amongst historical scholars.
Like, not just from Israeli historians. Actually, it's a lot of Israeli historians are the ones that find this research, but just largely in all of Israeli Palestinian, like in the entire like academic sphere. But yeah, so I really wish that they had just said that, right? That like originally it was thought that Palestinians had left because of radio broadcasts and their work.
No, it wasn't originally thought. That was made up. I mean, these were like it was originally thought. People had radios at the time. The only reason the state put that propaganda out there in order to muddy the waters. We've known for, I think, like 50 years going on that those transmissions did not exist.
We're radio broadcasts, but there's a lot of new historical information.
It's not new. We're talking decades old. We're talking... Let's see. When was that exactly? Let's see. No, okay. Trying to find the name. In fact, the reality is that the broadcasts actually were calling on Palestinians to remain. Yeah, okay, let me see. Yeah, we're talking, okay, this is, okay, what was the name of the... Okay, let me see. Yeah, Erskine Childers. When was this investigation done? Where are these footnotes? Footnote 8. Yeah, 1961. 1961, and he was already talking about that. He had already looked at these radio logs, and there was no evidence. We're literally talking about this bullshit that they never believed in the first place. It was just state propaganda. like Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, or any number of other such things. That nobody seriously believed it. They did not. In fact, the broadcast that exists actually, we're telling the Palestinians to stay in their homes to keep their land.
Saying it's much more likely this way. I wish they would have said that, right? Instead of...
There's no controversy over the broadcast. They don't exist. We've had with the research on that was debunked in 1961 by Erskine Childers, who meticulously went through the records of the fucking listening station on Cyprus and found no evidence of them. In fact, with the evidence of radio broadcasts from Arab states to the Palestinians was the exact opposite. This is not a controversy. What she's talking about here was a lie. And it is a lie that was debunked 51 years ago.
Of just acting like it's a fact, because we don't know for sure. It's just,
yes, we fucking do.
Just like things that, that we're arguing based on likelihoods and statistics.
No, they're not based on likelihoods and statistics. They're based on fucking documents. Plan Dalet is not a likelihood and a statistic. It was fucking documents found in archives. The Arab radio broadcast specifically calling on the civilian population, the Palestinian civilian population, to stay in their homes and stand their ground and not get kicked out of Palestine. Those are documented. This isn't statistics and probabilities here. That we're talking about fucking archival sources, and the debate that she's talking about was over a very long time ago.
And various numbers. I've actually done a stream where I went detail for detail over each village and what happened in each village.
Oh god, that's gonna be fucked up. I mean, this is just straight up Nakba denialism. And Vosh fucking platforms her and gives her tea and sympathy when, like, anti-colonial people of color go on his stream and he just throws them to the fucking wolves. He's just totally showing his ass by supporting her.
Talking about what crimes happen in those villages, and whether or not those villages end up becoming refugees. And you have to get that down to the details, like the actual numbers, to release this kind of stuff.
Well, except the things people already did that. The reason you fucking bullshit streamer can talk about this is that people already did this research down to the details 40 years ago. I mean, the new historians, they were called in Israel, they aren't very new anymore. There have been like 2-3 generations since them. And the result is there is literally no serious debate that there was a planned mass expulsion. She's acting like she's... Like, what, does she think that she's the first person to go through these figures? This is a historical consensus, and the thing is that even Vox is actually trying to find the way to say this in the way that, like, offends the fewest fucking Zionist propagandists. Okay? Because that's what Vox does. Vox is erotica for centrists. And so they avoid actually just outright saying that there was, using the word Nakba, or, pointing out that it was a planned expulsion, pointing out that massive lies were told by Israel, by the state, in order to obfuscate it. They're trying to soften that as much as possible, but the fact that they're willing to acknowledge it at all should tell you just how uncontroversial it is.
At the end of the day, we have no records from Israel, from the Israeli government, even though they've released...
Yes, we fucking do. What do you think the historians base their works on? They go to the archives, and it's true, a lot of archives are still closed. There's a whole lot of shit that they don't want people to see. There's a whole, and we know how bad it is, because some of it's occasionally accidentally ended up in the public domain, stuff... And, it's just massacres and just massive atrocities, and it's absolutely horrible shit that historians aren't supposed to see because of national security.
So-called release all their documents to historians, that there was any intention to kick out or ethnically cleanse the area. However,
Well, except that
there are little tidbits and signs. In the I think it was in
little tidbits and signs, like the fact that they planted trees all over all the villages that they had emptied out of people. Little tidbits and signs, like refusing to let the people come back to their villages after the war was over. You mean little tidbits and signs, like declaring all the land absentee land and declaring that only people with a Jewish ID card would ever be able to use that land because it was handed to the Jewish National Fund. I mean, like little tidbits like that, like the fact that there's an entire decades-long debate over the importance of maintaining an artificial Jewish majority in the country so that they can claim to be nominally democratic while at the same time being a Jewish state in the sense the Jews have greater rights than everybody else in the state. I mean, you mean little tidbits like that?
early 1930s or late 1920s, David Ben-Gurion had brought up the idea of ethnically cleansing Palestine.
And he was not the only one.
I think that is like our one connection. And
that is not our one connection. I mean, here's the thing. She says some things that are just so ignorant but are not Zionist talking points. But here, this is just sort of... This is ignorant as fuck. I mean, it's like she's knows enough to know that she could not just outright deny it, but at the same time she doesn't want to acknowledge it. So she pretends that it's a debate like creationists do.
What makes me think it was somewhat intentional. But otherwise...
Somewhat intentional.
So we don't have as many records to prove it.
And now, okay, so you're saying that and she's acknowledged, note, that it's the Israeli government that is withholding so many of their archives from this time. Now, do you think the Israeli government is withholding those archives because the stuff in there makes Israel look good? I mean, the stuff that they have released is enough for a trial over crimes against humanity.
We also have a lot of records that say the opposite, right?
No, we don't.
And this is where the historical method really comes into play to debate, which record, like which source is going to be more accurate. So, for example, we know that there were Arab broadcasts from the neighboring Arab countries literally telling Arabs to leave regions.
That is not true. We've known since 1961 that was a lie. The broadcasts that were going to Palestinian civilians at the time, I mean, there were broadcasts, that much is true. They were saying the exact opposite.
So it's very hard to know, like was it...
Yeah, it's very hard to know if you ignore all the facts. Like, this was not, like, some misconception. Remember, we're talking about something that was on the radio. People would have heard it. And somehow, like, none of the people who were the intended recipients had ever heard these broadcasts. And then Erskine Childers goes and looks at the logs, and wow, it turns out the radio listening equipment that is recording every single broadcast that is in the region also has no record of them, and they only have records of broadcasts saying the exact opposite thing. She's talking about this shit like there's some debate over it. There's no debate. That debate ended when Erskine Childers went and looked at the listening station records, because after that there was absolutely no evidence that these broadcasts ever happened.
Just that they were told to leave, or were they pushed out to leave, and was this an intentional thing by...
No, this is bad. I mean, this is next level bullshit. I haven't heard somebody bring up these fake-ass radio broadcasts that didn't exist, that were made up and were debunked in 1961 when fucking Kennedys walked the earth. Okay? This isn't some new information. You've got the fucking internet at your fingertips. Are you deliberately avoiding looking at the evidence? Or do you know the evidence well enough to know that it just doesn't favor you? And with that, I think we're going to just finish up for now. But, I mean, at this point, there really can be no debate. This is just straight up Nakba denial. She is using like Ernst Zünder grade propaganda in order to cast doubt on a massive historical racist atrocity. An atrocity that is going on to this day. She's acting like there is doubt when there isn't doubt. I mean, there's certain crimes, there's certain atrocities where if you do that, you're actually potentially risking prosecution. I don't think that actually necessarily helps all that much, but if we're going to have that, then it really would have to be all of them. And in this case, I mean, this is not some ongoing thing. I mean, in the sense that we just don't know because events are rapidly developing. We're talking about something that happened in 1948. Historians have had a very long time to look at it. Generations of historians have looked at the evidence. That's why there's no actual controversy amongst historians, unlike propagandists, who have tried to keep the controversy alive with just absolute falsifications that are just an absolute joke, like Joan Peters. This is just next level bullshit. I mean, this is like, it is really saying something. And fucking Vosh, the guy who debates racists, that's his whole thing. He's the guy who debates racists. That's like his whole marketing thing. Has her on after she's said, she says this racist shit. This Nakba denial. I mean, it's soft Nakba denial. She says, oh, well, I guess I kind of think it happened, but, I can understand why people don't. And it's like, fuck you. I mean, he is showing his ass by having her on and not just immediately tearing her to shreds. Which he only seems to do with anti-racists who come on his show. Because Foch is a big fucking racist. And he uses white nationalist talking points to defend colonialism, so of course he's gonna make his peace with Zionism. Pretty much all the white nationalists have. And with that cheery thought, I will say good night until tomorrow. If you've enjoyed the stream, please consider paying for the stream. My Patreon link is at the bottom of the screen. Always love to see new supporters there.